Today, we're going to conclude this series and we're going to talk about what if you disagree with an audit. Because remember, the IRS is comprised of human beings just like you and I, and they make mistakes. And sometimes the computer systems that they use also make mistakes.
Welcome to the Tax Relief with Timalyn Bowen's podcast. Are you behind on taxes? Is the IRS threatening you or your business? Are you overwhelmed and confused about how to resolve your tax issues? Let's join Timalyn as she explains your options and how she may be able to help. Timalyn Bowens is America's favorite EA.
Hey, family. Welcome to episode 63 of the Tax Relief with Timalyn Bowens podcast. We've been in a series talking about IRS audits. So a month ago in episode 61, we covered what is an IRS audit. Then 2 weeks ago in episode 62, we talked about why a taxpayer may be selected for an audit and what the audit process actually looks like. Today, we're going to conclude this series and we're going to talk about what if you disagree with an audit. Because remember, the IRS is comprised of human beings just like you and I, and they make mistakes. And sometimes the computer systems that they use also make mistakes. So you do have rights when it comes to being audited. Remember, last time we talked about the right to representation. We talked about the right to due process. So, in this situation, when you are faced with an audit decision that you don't agree with, you have the right to appeal that decision. Now, before we get into appealing the decision, let's talk about the decisions that the IRS can make, okay? So the IRS can conclude an audit in 3 different ways. Number 1, it could be a no change audit. This means an audit in which you have substantiated all of the items being reviewed and the results in no changes. Okay, so remember, we've talked about the burden of proof, not just in this audit series, but we talk about it all the time on this podcast. If you are going to make a claim that you can't afford to pay back taxes, you have to substantiate that. If you are going to make a claim for certain credits or deductions on your tax return, you have to substantiate that. So a no change audit means that you've successfully substantiated the things that the IRS called into question, okay? The second way that an audit can be concluded is an agreed conclusion. This is an audit where the IRS proposed changes and you make sure that you understand what they're proposing and you actually agree with the changes. Now, in this situation, it doesn't necessarily mean that you maliciously filed the return wrong. You may not have understood everything completely before signing and filing. Let me explain. When you have a tax professional, a paid tax professional, do your return, you need to make sure that you understand what you are signing before you actually sign it, giving them permission to e-file the return, because you will be on the hook for what's on the return. Okay? And I've seen it happen time and time again where a client will tell me, hey, I'm going through this correspondence audit. They are proposing these changes. And when I dig in and I ask for proof to substantiate the claims that were made, they say, oh, that didn't really happen that year. That is a situation that you can avoid by making sure that you review your tax return and you ask questions about the things that you are claiming on your return to the person who is preparing it. Okay, your paid preparer is going to be the person who understands what's on your specific return, and you know whether or not you have what you need to substantiate those claims. So, the IRS proposes changes, you agree that those changes are correct. the conclusion of this audit is going to be agreed. Now, the third and final, we've had no change, agreed, so you probably know where we're going. It's disagreed. This is an audit where the IRS has proposed changes. You make sure that you understand what they are proposing, but you disagree with those changes. Okay? Now, when you disagree, everything may not come back in your favor. The IRS may give you some of what you were trying to claim, but not all of it. Okay? So let's say that you have an audit conclusion that is disagreed. You are like, no, absolutely not. You have two options, okay? Because at the end of the audit for the conclusion, you will be asked to sign the examination report, or it could be a similar form depending on the type of audit that was conducted. All right. Now, with this, if you are disagreeing, you can file an appeal if you have enough time left in the statute of limitations, because you can only file an appeal within a certain amount of time, or you can also participate in the mediation process that the IRS offers. This is called alternative dispute resolution. This is called ADR. Now, I said two options there, actually three. Before we get as far as requesting the alternative dispute resolution, the ADR, or filing an appeal, you can actually request a conference with an IRS manager. So this IRS manager is going to be the person who is over the auditor who is conducting the audit on your account. Okay. So with that meeting, it's essentially going to be the same as the mediation or filing the appeal. It's just going to be less formal, and you're still dealing with the same office. Whereas when we file an appeal, what we have there is a separate office within the IRS that's independent, that is going to look at this with a fresh new set of eyes. Okay. Now remember, we did talk about IRS appeals right before we started this audit series, so I don't want to go too far into that. Just a quick recap that with it, again, it's going to be an independent IRS office, and they are going to try to help you get this resolved. They're going to look at the facts that the IRS has laid out, and then they're going to look at the facts that you have laid out to see where the discrepancy is, and then they make a decision with which person, and I'm calling the IRS a person here, that they're going to side with. Okay? Now, with the ADR, the alternative dispute resolution, instead of any type of litigation, this is going to be, again, less formal than the appeals process. Okay. So, in my area of expertise, if you were doing this on your own, you may want to consider looking at an ADR versus filing an actual appeal. Okay? So, during this process, you are supposed to be treated fair and impartial. The IRS is supposed to be courteous and professional. They are supposed to listen to your concerns, explain your rights in the process. When you have questions, they're to be responsive, or if they ask you for more information, they're to be responsive to that as well. And they're supposed to allow you reasonable time to respond to any request for their information. Now, if you feel that you aren't getting this in the conference with the manager or through the mediation, then by all means, most definitely, you need to go ahead and file that appeal. And don't forget, one of your rights as a taxpayer is the right to representation. So if you don't feel equipped to appeal this audit or request a meeting with the manager or go through the mediation, you do have the right to representation. So you could hire a CPA, enrolled agent, or a tax attorney to represent you in any of these meetings. Okay. Now, if you can't afford it, and you meet certain criteria, you may be able to work with a low income taxpayer clinic. These taxpayer clinics offer representation for free for taxpayers who are going to qualify. Okay, now there are income thresholds and limitations that make you qualify for this, but that is something that you may want to take into consideration if you need representation and you cannot afford it. Okay, now when we are looking at the mediation program, right? This is going to be voluntary. You don't have to go through mediation, okay? It's also non-binding, which means each party, you and the IRS, retains 100% control over whether or not to settle the case. All right? So there's no one, including the mediator, that can force either party to do something they don't agree to do. Okay, so big difference here. When we're dealing with appeals, appeals can make the IRS take action. The appeals office can say, no, the IRS is right. You do have to pay that back, or that claim for the deduction or credit isn't valid. Okay, whereas with mediation, they're helping you get on the same page, and then in the end, you both have to agree. Okay. It's effective when both parties have a desire to resolve the disputed issue. Sometimes the IRS is like, hey, we're not going back and forth with you, or vice versa. And that's why things go straight to appeal instead of mediation. Again, mediation is not going to be as formal, but in some cases, it is a better first option than filing an appeal. Okay. It's appropriate when all issues are fully resolved except the issue for which mediation is requested. All right. Listen, sometimes, again, going back to an audit conclusion where it's disagreed, sometimes you all will agree on everything but one thing. This is a much less costly way to get the situation resolved. Okay. But again, nobody can force you to go to mediation. Okay. Mediation is not going to be a replacement for the audit or collection process, right? And it's not a time to present new information or raise new issues. So if you went to mediation with the IRS, they're not going to be able to dig deeper into the return and say, hey, we want this, that, and the other as well. Okay. It's also not a chance to try and get a better deal from the IRS or to buy yourself more time before the IRS closes its case. This may be good for your case, again, if the IRS is still considering your case and your issues are unresolved. If you gave the IRS information to support your position and we're just kind of waiting still. If you don't have many disputed issues, so again, maybe you all are agreeing on everything but one thing, mediation might be the right answer for you. Or if you want to resolve the dispute at the earliest stage of your audit as possible. All right. So if you don't agree, we have the request for a conference with an IRS manager. We could do mediation, which is the alternative dispute resolution, also known as ADR, or you can file an appeal. Now, if the main reason that you are disagreeing with the audit conclusion is because now you have a tax bill that you can't afford to pay, remember that you do have the right to due process, and the IRS does have a collection process as well, where you will have several different payment options available. We've talked about some of them here on the podcast, like in episode 10, where we talk about installment agreements. We also have currently not collectible as an option. We have the offer and compromise as an option. If you are DIYing this process, you can check out publication 594, the IRS collection process, to see more details about what they do along this journey that you're taking. Okay? Now, I hope you found this to be informative, but check this out. I don't want you to go through this scared or alone. If you feel that you need representation from a qualified professional, you can book a call with me at my office, Bowen's Tax Solutions, at www.bowenstaxsolutions.com. And I'll leave the link down below in the show notes. Even if it's not me, just make sure that you get the help that you need, right? And I would be delighted as well if you would please share this podcast, because 1 in 50 taxpayers has a tax issue. And by doing so, you are helping me to fill the tax literacy gap one taxpayer at a time. Thank you. And I'll see you all in the next episode. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen today. I'd like to thank Jim Ray Consulting Services for helping me get this message out to you. I hope you found the information helpful. Did you know 1 in 50 people have a tax problem? Please share this episode with your friends and family, because you never know who may need help. Again, thanks for listening. Hey, just as a reminder, this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It provides a framework and possible solutions for solving your tax problems, but it is not legally binding. Please consult your tax professional regarding your specific tax situation.